Marriage is the fastest, cleanest, and most socially approved way to destroy your freedom. And the wildest part is this. People will pressure you into it with a smile. They'll call it love, maturity, responsibility, the next step. But they will never tell you the truth, that marriage is a lifelong contract where you lose your autonomy in exchange for emotional labor, financial obligation, and a slowly shrinking identity. You don't walk into it freely. You walk into it conditioned, trained, groomed by culture to believe you're incomplete without it. Schopenhauer didn't fall for that illusion. He saw marriage as nature's smartest trap, a system where the individual gives up their own life to serve a biological agenda disguised as romance. Schopenhauer didn't need modern research to see the truth. He understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. If you want to limit a man's potential, don't chain his hands, chain his obligations. Give him a wedding. Give him expectations. Give him responsibility disguised as romance. He'll walk straight into the system designed to tame him. And it's not just philosophy, it's history. Look at the men who changed the world: Tolstoy, Kafka, Einstein, Beethoven, even Schopenhauer himself. They weren't afraid of love. They were afraid of losing the one thing a thinking person cannot live without: freedom, solitude, creative space, a mind unchained. They understood the cost long before the rest of the world did. And if you listen closely to their stories, you'll see how marriage destroyed their peace, drained their genius, or forced them into silent suffering behind closed doors. Modern people rarely notice what marriage actually demands. They see the celebration, the photos, the romance, the cinematic proposal, but they don't see the psychological contract underneath. Marriage is not built on love. Love fades and marriage remains. Marriage is built on sacrifice, compromise, duty, shared finances, shared routines, shared futures, shared consequences. Every part of your life becomes negotiated, discussed, approved, questioned, monitored, adjusted. Not because your partner is evil, but because the architecture of marriage requires constant merging. You don't lose your freedom in one dramatic moment. You lose it in tiny steps that seem harmless. You lose it through routines that become cages. You lose it through emotional expectations that become obligations. You lose it through daily compromises that reshape your identity until the person you once were becomes unrecognizable. The man who once dreamed boldly becomes the man who must justify everything to avoid conflict, to maintain peace, to keep the household functioning. Marriage takes time. Time is the currency of freedom. Once your time is no longer fully yours, neither is your life. Schopenhauer believed marriage is the victory of the will, nature's blind drive to sustain itself, over individuality. Nature doesn't care about your dreams, your work, your independence. Nature cares about reproduction, stability, and keeping you busy enough to maintain the system. Marriage is the delivery mechanism for that agenda, and society reinforces it because society needs predictable citizens, predictable workers, predictable families, predictable routines. People who won't disrupt the order because they're too entangled in responsibilities to rebel. Marriage is the anchor that keeps you obedient. If you think that sounds dramatic, look at the men who experienced its weight firsthand. Tolstoy, one of the greatest writers to ever live, spent decades in a marriage that suffocated him. Sophia, his wife, wasn't malicious. She simply embodied the expectations the institution demanded. She edited his manuscripts tirelessly, but also fought him constantly, questioned his morality, read his diaries, monitored his friendships, and pulled him deeper into domestic tension. His home was not peace. It was turmoil, and his genius suffered for it. He once wrote that he felt trapped in his own life, that he wished for silence, but his marriage produced only conflict and obligation. Tolstoy, a man with a mind that shaped literature, found himself drowning in the psychological noise of domestic life. Love wasn't the problem. Marriage was. It took everything that made him whole and replaced it with duties that drained him. Kafka saw the future before it even happened. He knew marriage would destroy the fragile, sensitive soil his creativity grew from. He wrote that marriage would annihilate him because the demands of partnership, conversation, presence, emotional availability would suck the oxygen out of his inner world. Kafka's mind thrived in solitude, late nights, complete separation from noise. Marriage to him was the opposite environment. He couldn't be both a husband and a writer. One identity would need to die for the other to live. Einstein, arguably one of the most brilliant men in history, found himself suffocated in his first marriage. The expectations overwhelmed him. The emotional demands consumed him. He needed silence. Marriage demanded connection. He needed freedom. Marriage demanded stability. He needed solitude. Marriage demanded participation. Eventually, things became so unbearable that he drafted a literal contract of rules just to survive. No affection, no interruptions, no conversations unrelated to necessities. This wasn't cruelty. It was desperation. It was a genius trying not to drown. Beethoven avoided the trap entirely. He saw what marriage did to other composers, how domestic life flattened their creativity, diluted their ambition, and buried their originality. He wanted no part of it. He chose solitude not because he hated companionship, but because his art required a mind untouched by obligation. Schopenhauer observed all of this and arrived at a brutal truth. Marriage is not designed to support a thinker, a creator, or an individual. Marriage is designed to support the species, the society, the collective. It is the enemy of solitary excellence, and yet people still walk into it willingly. Why? Because marriage disguises itself as love, as maturity, as stability, as companionship, as safety, as purpose, as the right thing to do. Society rewards you for entering the cage. You get praise, gifts, social acceptance, status approval. But what you really get is a lifetime of obligations that slowly consume the parts of you that made you unique. Marriage begins with romance, but it ends with routine, and routine kills identity. You start compromising, not in big dramatic ways, but in tiny, almost invisible ones. You stop doing certain things because they cause tension. You change your habits to avoid arguments. You alter your dreams to fit the shared plan. You censor your feelings because honesty creates conflict. You swallow your desires to keep the peace. You adopt new responsibilities that were never yours to begin with. You become smaller, softer, predictable, manageable, acceptable. Marriage turns you into the safest version of yourself, not the truest version. And here's the dark part. Society expects you to shrink. If you don't, you're labeled selfish, immature, unwilling to commit. But shrinking is simply the slow death of individuality, and marriage rewards it. You lose solitude. Solitude is where freedom grows. Lose solitude, lose freedom. You lose silence. Silence is where creativity grows. Lose silence. Lose depth. You lose unpredictability. Unpredictability is where ambition grows. Lose unpredictability, lose possibility. You lose control over your own time. Time is life. Lose time, lose life. Everything becomes shared. and shared becomes monitored. Your spending, your habits, your friendships, your goals, your downtime, your work, your decision-making. Even your thoughts must be filtered to maintain harmony. You don't realize how much freedom you had until marriage takes it. And by then, it's too late. Modern marriage is even worse. Today's expectations are extreme. You're expected to be emotionally available at all times, financially stable, supportive, communicative, selfless, present, nurturing, romantic, reliable, and fully invested. All while carrying your personal life, your work life, your social life, your financial responsibilities, your mental health, and your dreams. Marriage demands every version of you, all the time, without pause. No human has the capacity to give that much without losing themselves. Marriage is not the merging of two lives, it's the merging of two limitations, two insecurities, two fears of being alone, two fears of losing control, two fears of failing, two sets of childhood wounds, two emotional expectations, two different dreams forced into one compromise. And that compromise reshapes you until you barely remember who you were before marriage molded you. Marriage creates an identity the world approves of, a stable, predictable, sacrifice-driven adult, and kills the identity your childhood dreamt of, the free, ambitious, unpredictable individual who wanted to build a life that belonged only to you. You lose your privacy. You lose your unpredictability. You lose your silence. You lose your self-direction. You lose the ability to live without negotiation. You lose the right to change suddenly. You lose the freedom to disappear into your creativity. You lose the ability to chase your curiosity without permission. Marriage converts your life into a shared project. Shared projects require predictable behavior. Predictable behavior requires shrinking. Shrinking kills individuality, and individuality is the source of freedom. Marriage kills freedom by killing individuality. People who think marriage is safe forget one thing: a safe life is not a free life. Marriage convinces you that giving up yourself is noble, that sacrificing your dreams is responsible, that reducing your desires is mature, that surrendering your time is expected, but none of that is maturity. It's compliance. And society loves compliant people. That's why marriage is rewarded. Not because it produces happiness, but because it produces obedient, settled, predictable citizens who follow the script. Marriage is psychological domestication, not companionship. Domestication. It's the taming of individuality under the illusion of togetherness. The worst part is that the people who lose the most in marriage are the ones who think deeply, feel deeply, or create deeply. Those who need space to breathe. Those who need solitude to think. Those who need unpredictability to grow. Those who need silence to explore their mind. Those who need freedom to discover who they are. Marriage suffocates these people. Not intentionally, not maliciously, structurally. Marriage and individuality are two forces that cannot coexist peacefully. Nature knows this. Society knows this. History shows this. But individuals remain blind until the freedom they took for granted disappears. Men fear marriage not because of commitment, but because of the collapse of self that commitment demands. Women fear marriage because of the collapse of autonomy. Both lose something essential, but men lose the identity they built, and women lose the freedom they had. This is not romance. This is mutual limitation disguised as partnership. Marriage can be beautiful with two extraordinary people, but most aren't extraordinary. Most are scared. Most are insecure. Most need validation, stability, control, or emotional dependence. And marriage forces you to live with someone else's insecurities every single day. You don't just marry the person. You marry their moods, their trauma, their habits, their expectations, their wounds, their fears, their baggage, their family, their money problems, their emotional needs, and you become responsible for all of it. Marriage turns one life into two, but turns two freedoms into none. Schopenhauer saw marriage as nature's manipulation. Society calls it love. The individual experiences it as responsibility. And the result is a slow suffocation dressed in celebration. The deepest tragedy is not that marriage ruins freedom. It's that people don't notice the ruin until it's irreversible. Freedom is the one thing society never teaches you to protect. Marriage is the one thing society always teaches you to pursue. That alone should tell you everything. If you feel this, if you've seen the men history should have remembered fall under marriage, if you've felt your identity slowly slip under someone else's expectations, write in the comments, "I protect my freedom." Because freedom is the only thing marriage asks you to surrender, and the only thing you must never give away.